now that the election results are finally in California, a state that takes a notoriously long time to tally everything up, Golden State Democrats are a little worried about a clear right-wing shift among voters who used to be dependable Democratic voters. Now, it's not necessarily a right-wing shift. It's more that these are voters who aren't showing up to cast their ballots for Democrats anymore. And they also made some surprising congressional gains, despite what we've noticed with some of these typical Democratic voters staying at home. So let's get into the details. First, important to know that Trump flipped 10 counties red, and the state GOP picked off 3 legislative seats despite being vastly outspent. Okay, so that's some of the evidence that there's been a little bit of change in California, which is a deep blue state. So the biggest shift to the right is seen among Latino voters in the state, which is a huge blow to the Democrats, clearly. Historically, Democrats had been able to solidify support among Latino voters in California thanks to backlash over a previous proposition. It was known as Proposition 187. And that was an initiative that was targeting immigrants in the country illegally. And that moved Latino voters decisively toward the Democratic Party. However, now polling suggests that the Prop 87 era is over. And Latino voters, unsurprisingly, are concerned about affordability in a state like California. High taxes, high housing prices, and they feel that the Democratic Party hasn't done enough to help them with this. So a post-election poll conducted by a Democratic pollster named David Binder found that affordability and high cost of living in the state were the preeminent concerns among California's Latino voters. More than 3/4 of respondents said that California state government policies made prices much higher or somewhat higher. 53% disapproved of how the government is addressing the economy, including jobs and the cost of living. And guys, I can't emphasize enough how much resentment starts to build in a state where taxes are very high, but you also experience your quality of life diminish year after year after year. And you also see that you have less and less buying power because of, there's inflation throughout the country, but that inflation is even more pronounced in a state like California, especially when it's tied to housing prices.
Yeah. So look, there's an oddity here of the Democrats picking up 3 national seats in California. We'll get to that in a second. And I have a couple theories on that. But overall, the Democrats got their clock cleaned in California. And so when we talk about why, it's super important that we're honest with ourselves, because if we're not, we'll just keep making the same mistake. And the biggest state in the country will go more and more Republican. My God, if the Republicans capture California, it's over. It's over nationally completely. And we're not close to that now,
no.
Okay? So Adam Schiff, who was, in my opinion, a terrible candidate, ran against Steve Garvey, who had almost no money, and he still beat him by 19, but 19 is closer than what normally happens, yes. Especially because Garvey had no money at all, right? And so you see this red wave coming through the counties, affecting the state legislature, et cetera. And so when you ask them why they're going in this direction, the economy is a big part of it.
Right.
Like, so. And to me, the most critical stat, I don't know if you were going to get to this, Anna, but Trump only picked up 75,000 votes in California in this election. But Kamala Harris, the Democratic leader, lost 1.8 million votes from Joe Biden.
Yes, that's true. Yep.
And so what that shows you is not that the people woke up in California and were like, oh my God, I think Trump and the Republicans are so amazing and they're wonderful and we're now all Republicans. No, but they woke up and said, the Democrats haven't done something for me in so long that no, I'm not going to go vote for you because I have to, or it's my moral duty, or you're going to yell at me. No, you didn't deliver, so I'm not voting for you.
That's exactly right. Yes. So Harris got 1.8 million votes less than Joe Biden did in 2020 in the state of California. And so, look, a lot of this has to do with people who just didn't feel motivated to show up and vote. Some people, like myself, did show up and vote, but I did not vote for either presidential candidate. And so huge swaths of Latino voters specifically decided, I'm not going to vote for a presidential candidate here. And overall, there was a 9-point drop in voter turnout in the state. Now, a Republican consultant by the name of Mike Madrid says, I really want people to understand that the lack of voting, the lack of civic engagement is in and of itself a political statement. I totally agree with that. He continues. They finally left the bad relationship where this person is telling them over and over, I understand you, I get your needs, I hear what you're telling me, but then does not produce over and over and over again. Now they're finally saying, you know what, I'm out. And then the final statement from Mike Madrid is, in many ways, that's worse for Democrats. And this is so true. They really do have a hill to climb here, because they're not going to be able to get those voters back until they establish trust. So there's a really big burden on them, especially when the primary driver of affordability is housing. It's not like you can solve this by the midterms. And so this piece focuses on the uphill battle for Democrats in the state of California leading into the 2026 midterm elections. And by the way, in 2026, California is electing a new governor, thank God. So we'll see how that all plays out. But there are the ballot initiatives as well, because I think that's where it's become abundantly clear that voters in California have reconsidered their more left-wing positions on certain issues. So California voters actually approved 8 out of the 9 general election ballot measures endorsed by the state's Republican Party. The 9th, they just remained neutral on, and that was the one that would amend California's state constitution to protect gay marriage. Also, Prop 36, which imposes stricter penalties on some theft and drug crimes, easily passed with 70% of voters in favor of it. And that reversed a decade-long trend in the state of California that embraced criminal justice reform and basically went against the more tough-on-crime policies. Yeah,
so when they ask folks, what's crime? And what did we tell you over the last 2 years? Crime, right? Yeah. And a lot of folks yelled at us and said, no, let's all pretend it doesn't exist. You can pretend all you like. The voters actually feel it or they don't feel it. And it's not about just right-wing narratives or messaging, et cetera, because what was the equivalent of Prop 36 to increase penalties was tried 2 years ago and it didn't, I think 4 years ago, and it didn't work because people didn't feel crime. Now they feel the crime and they're like, oh yeah. So look, 9 counties go to Trump. 8 out of 9 ballot measures goes to the Republicans, including the most important one, Prop 36, to increase penalties. As Anna pointed out, 7 out of 10, not close.
8 out of 9.
No, 7 out of 10 voters on Prop 36.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, you're right.
And that's in a massively Democratic state, right? Mm-hmm. So now when you go to the oddity of the Democrats who won the national seats, congressional seats, as the red wave was taking over California otherwise. So my theories on that are, number one, none of the stories talked about it, but we always talk about it in the red states, and we never talk about it in the blue states, even though people acknowledge, oh, the blue states do it too, which is gerrymandering. So I don't know how much of a factor that was, because all of the articles are religiously avoiding it. Yeah,
I'm going to get into that actually, real quick, because I looked into it. But before I do, I have to give you this. I've never read a quote that resonated with me more than this one does. So I'm going to read it. Okay. So Jessica Milan Patterson, who's the chairperson for the state Republican Party, says that, the voters' approval of things like Prop 36 was a sign that voters were increasingly agreeing with her party on ideas, that the first step to bring them over to GOP candidates and eventually identifying as Republicans themselves. That's not the part that I completely agree or resonates with me. This one does. You don't get red-pilled overnight. It's the issues that affect your everyday life first, and then you connect them with people, and then you connect it with a party. That is so true. And that is what I was trying to get across to people. When you're affected day to day by quality of life issues, and all you hear from the Democratic Party is shut up, no, it's not happening, and if it's happening, it's not that big of a deal. Man, that really does red pill people. It builds resentment toward the party. And I really think that Democrats need to pivot away from that because they're going to keep losing if they think that that type of treatment of voters, that type of disrespect toward voters is going to get them anywhere.
So look, I do something that apparently not a lot of other people in politics or media do. I talk to normies, people who don't follow politics and news religiously, right? And so in California, whenever you talk to normies and you ask them about Biden, what's the first thing they would say? Too old. Every single person, Democrat, Republican, it didn't matter because they all have eyes. And so if you're not watching Morning Joe and having him brainwash you every morning about, no, he's young and dynamic, you're going to see Biden once, twice and go, oh, he's way too old. What's he doing running for office, right? But in the case of California, specifically in this topic that we're talking about, every single normie said crime's out of control. We're worried, we're scared, we're nervous. I had a friend that had this happen to. I had this that happened to that. So you see it in the stats, you see it in the anecdotes, you see it in every single normal person that you talk to. So when our side said no, they're all being, nervous Nellies for no reason. They're imagining it. What it did was it doubled down on their anger towards Democrats. Because they said, number one, I'm angry at you because there's crime and you're not doing anything about it. And number two, when you gaslight me and tell me there is no crime, then I'm starting to get mad at you, right?
Yep.
And so that's when the red pilling happens.
Yeah.
So we're trying to block that, stop that from happening. And you've seen some of the fights that have happened on our side. But so let me get back to why the Democrats is the national level one in California, because one is partly gerrymandering. Anna, you said you were going to get into that. I don't know if you've got more on that. Secondly, we had way more money than the Republicans did in California. So we were not only able to spend more money on ads, but we got out the vote better. We did same day registration. And some of these we barely won by like 800 votes and 160 votes, et cetera. And so we did a good job with that and had more money. But finally, the issues mattered because
struggle to strike a balance with Trump a little known outside Los Angeles, California. Republican has emerged as perhaps the most competent communicator to public and to Trump and anyone squaring up to the press and news cameras few hours. Los Angeles County Supervisor Catherine Berger, a Republican, has made cheered by some in city for discharge and updates on local and national news programs. On Saturday, he did what many Democrats are loath to do: dress a request for help for Trump in congratulatory, flattering terms. In a letter, Berger first praised Trump for his 2028 response to Full Sea Fire, which hit the Santa Monica area during his first term, after extending a formal invitation for Trump to visit affected areas in Los Angeles. Berger effectively